So this is the first video for Unit 2. Unit 1 was all about review and topics that hopefully you already knew how to do, and we just want to spend some time to make sure to build those skills if we needed to. Okay, so Unit 2 is all about equations. We're starting off very basic. Some of this stuff you probably already know, but this will just be another refresher. So we're talking about your basic equations, right? The defining thing of an equation is that they have these equal signs. Seems simple, but the equal sign is the most important thing on here. What it does is it divides your equation into two parts. It creates a left side and a right side. And the idea with these equations is that they are balanced, meaning the left side and the right side, they have the same value. Even if they look differently, they have the same value. They're equal. Okay? So what we do with these equations is we move things around to make them look the way we want them to look. Typically, our goal when we're solving an equation is we move pieces around until you have the variable on one side. And the variable just means like the letter, right? Most of the time it's x, sometimes it's y, but it's the letter that's part of the equation. So you move pieces around until you have the variable on one side and everything else on the other side. Okay? So typically you have to keep moving things around until you get something like this, where it's x equals and then whatever it equals, right? We need the variable by itself on one side, everything else goes to the other. And the way we move things around is what's called inverses. So I'm going to scroll up a little bit. Okay? So the way we move things around is we do what's called inverse operations. And inverse is just a fancy way of saying opposite. Okay? So the inverse operation, so let's say if we were adding something, the inverse of adding something would be subtracting it. And vice versa. The inverse of subtracting something would be adding it. Those are inverse operations. Same thing with multiplication. The inverse, or the opposite of multiplication, is division, and the inverse of division is multiplication. Those are inverses. They undo each other, essentially. So that's how you move things around from one side to the other side, is you do the opposite. Okay? Now, in this video, we're only going to deal with very basic equations to start off with. Okay, these are just going to be one-step equations. So 4 quick examples. Okay, so first one, if I were to give you x minus 2 equals 5. So very easy equation. My recommendation is because as we go on in the class, the equations get a little bit more challenging. So I always start off by drawing that line where the equal sign is. That way you can clearly see, okay, what's on the left side versus what's on the right side. Okay? So the idea is we need to get the x term, the x variable by itself. Okay, so we want to get this alone, which means we need to get rid of everything else that's not attached to it, right? So we need to get rid of that negative 2. Now, negative 2 and minus 2 mean the same thing. So you can read it either way. So the inverse of a negative 2 would be positive 2. So what we're going to do is right below, we're going to say plus 2. Okay? Because that's the inverse operation. But because this is an equation, we have to remain balanced. So there's this big idea in Algebra 1 that whatever you do to one side of an equation, you have to do the exact same thing to the other side. So because I added 2 on the left, I have to add 2 on the right. And notice I lined it up, right? You line it up with like terms. So like numbers go with numbers. If you're moving variables around, like x's would go with x's, y's would go with y's, and so forth. okay? And the line goes across, and now we're going to simplify, okay? Now, what we did here, -2 plus 2 makes 0, which is what we want it to happen. Essentially, these are going away. They're canceling each other out. That's called a zero pair, because when you add them together, it makes 0, okay? Now we're going to bring down the stuff we didn't use, the parts that are left over, so that x is still there. So we're going to bring down x. On the right-hand side, we can combine 5 and 2. Those are like terms. So 5 plus 2 gives you 7. Now that we have x by itself equals a number, we're done. Okay, but normally we'd have to keep going until we get x by itself. But these are all one-step equations. So they're fairly easy. Okay. Similarly, if I give you another one, let's say I'd use a different variable. Y plus 6 equals -5. Okay, there's the line, so you can see the left side and the right side. Now, technically, the variable doesn't really matter. You can put whatever letter you want there. Most of the time it'll be x's or y's, but you could put like a z or whatever letter. It doesn't really matter that much. Okay. All right. So again, the goal is to get the variable by itself. So you want to keep the y and get rid of everything else. It's a +6 or +6. So the inverse of that will be subtracting. So we're going to line it up. So -6. And again, whatever you do to one side, you have to do the other side. And make sure it lines up with its like terms. Okay, this creates a 0 pair, so those go away. Bring down the leftovers. We only have y. And use a calculator if you need to, but -5 minus 6. You spent $5, and then you spent another $6. So in total, you spent $11. And then we're done. Okay? All right, 2 more, and then I want you guys to try some questions on your own. All right, so if I give you something like this, again, this is still a one-step equation. So -3x equals 18. There's my line. Okay, now notice there's no like plus signs or minus signs between the 3 and the x. They're attached, right? Whenever things are attached like that, that means they're being multiplied together. So you could read the left side as -3 times x. It's multiplication. So when you do the inverse operation, the inverse of multiplication would be division. Okay. Now I've said in previous videos that division and fractions are the exact same thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw a fraction bar, and we want to get rid of that 3. So we're going to divide by 3. However, there's a catch. If you only divide by 3, that negative sign is still going to be there. We need to get rid of that as well. Okay, so we're also going to divide by a negative. So we're dividing by -3 in total. Okay, and again, whatever you do to one side, do to the other side. So we're going to divide this by -3. What that causes is that the 3's will cancel out. Okay. Oops, sorry. Let me rewrite that. Okay, we're causing these 3's to cancel. Okay, and what's also happening is that negative divided by a negative also cancels out, making it positive, which is what we need, right? We don't want negative x, we just want x. So now we bring on the leftovers. That x is still there. We only got rid of that 3. Okay, and then on the right side, 18 divided by -3. It actually works out nicely. Use a calculator if you need to. A positive number divided by a negative number gives you a negative, and 18 divided by 3 gives you 6. Okay? All right, one more. So far you've seen, in the first example we did a subtraction question where you had to add. The second one was an addition where you had to subtract. Third one was a multiplication where you had to divide. So the fourth one let's give you one that already has division. Okay, so let's go with x divided by 5 equals 7. Okay, again, fractions and division are the same thing. So when you read this, you could read this as x divided by 5 equals 7. So the inverse of dividing by 5 would be multiplying by 5. So we're going to put the multiplication dot and we'll put a 5. Notice I put it in the top because we want them to cancel out. Okay, whatever you do to one side, we're going to do to the other. Okay, that causes the 5s to cancel each other out. Bring down the leftovers. And 7 times 5 gives you 35. All right, you've seen one example for each operation. There's an addition, a subtraction, a multiplication, and a division. Okay, at this point, I want you guys to try a couple on your own. Again, make sure you guys try them. Don't be afraid to get it wrong. You can always fix it if you make a mistake. Okay, so number 1, I want you to try x minus 6 equals 3. And number 2, 2x equals 8. Okay, go ahead and pause the video and try them on your own. And then when you're ready to check your answer, press play.